Missing someone. Love with all your heart. Missing someone. Love with heart.
Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I have a brand new client. I've never done her hair before and she has quite a bit of regrowth. So there were a few concerns before we started off with her hair. So she has roots that are super grown out, and we decided that we were going to do something that was going to keep her solid. We had discussed possibly doing highlights, but she likes being solid and likes being super bright, so I felt like highlights would have been a little bit too dark for her, and it's really hard to transition back from highlights to solid, so we just opted to continue doing her hair solid. And then the other thing that we are trying to fix today is in the middle of where her last retouch was. She felt like her hair didn't light enough, and that there's a lot of warm spots that were really bugging her. So those are some things that I'm going to be going over today to try and fix and even out for her. So since this is a new client, I've never done her hair before, I'm not quite sure how well her roots are going to lift, so I'm going to be starting in the back. And you can see I took a section and I kind of outlined the back section that I'm going to be painting on first, and I already kind of sectioned out the top because I want to start doing the underneath first. I find that doing it this way, it kind of evens out, since the back is such a big section. When you split it in half and do the bottom half first and then do the top half after, it kind of helps with evening it out, especially because since her roots are a little bit longer, I felt that this application was going to take me a little bit longer to do, and I opted to do it this way just because of timing and because I wanted to get it as even as possible. The other thing that I was considering here is her natural is like a level 6, I would say. It's very ashy though, so there's two ways that I could have done this, or there's probably more, but there's two ways that in my head I was thinking that I could have done this. And the first way is the way that I'm doing it right now, is just hitting the bleach root to end and painting it on and really feathering at the line of regrowth where that demarcation line is. And then the second way is hitting away from the root and then hitting back to the root later. And later you'll see I kind of switch techniques, because I find out after I finish applying on the back of her head that yes, the mid part of the regrowth, or like the longer part of the regrowth, it doesn't lighten as well as the root, so that heat from her scalp really does play a part, and it does kind of create some banding. And that's also something I do mention in the consultation before I begin any type of longer retouch, because in my mind, when roots are this long, it's pretty much considered a correction, because you're really working with different heat zones, different lengths of the hair, and it just can be a little tricky, especially when they want to be something like a silver or a level 10. So you want to be really careful with overlapping. You want to try and get it as even as possible and prevent the least amount of banding. But of course, I always kind of tell my clients that you do risk banding because you waited so long, and that's just something, like, if you're not a client that is good about coming every 4 to 6 weeks and you do wait longer, you do risk banding. But it's always my goal to try and get it as even as possible. And of course, as I continue to do her hair, I do kind of get a sense and feel of what it's capable of and how it lifts. And so that's why later when I do the front part, I do my technique a little bit differently and I change it, and that's okay. Changing it up is totally fine as long as you know what you're doing and doing it for a good reason. Now you're probably wondering why I didn't just start off with the secondary technique where I do it away from the root, and the reason is because I figured just hitting the root from root to wherever the line of demarcation is, I just figured it was going to be easier to just go in and hit it once. And if I could avoid that, I would. But when I did realize that the roots were lightening a little bit quicker than the mids, that's when I quickly realized, oh no, I have to do that extra step and to prevent the banding. And I'll also show you guys how I kind of fix the banding in the back a little bit more after this all processes. But you're probably wondering what I'm using, and I'm using a cream bleach. And with this cream bleach, I'm just using 20 volume. The reason why I'm using a cream bleach is because I find that the cream bleach consistency, it's very thick, and it doesn't really expand as much as like a powder bleach could potentially. And so I feel like I have a little bit more control. The other reason why is because this cream bleach is white, so it's really easy for me to see if the hair is different levels. So that's why it was really easy for me to see that the roots were lightening a little bit lighter than the rest. So those are the two main reasons why I wanted to use cream. I honestly could have used any type of cream, but or any other lightener as well too, but I just find that the cream gives me a lot more control, and 20 volumes are just a good developer and volume strength that I generally will use for any type of root touch up. So you can see I did the bottom half, finished up the top half, and I left out the hairline at the nape here for last. So the reason why I left that part out last is because these hairs are a little bit finer. So hair that is a little bit on the finer side, they do process quicker with toner, lightener, any color. So I do save that for last. And of course, you just want to make sure that you're not over processing these hairs too. So I always do the hairline at the very end of each section. Now, if she was any darker than a level 6 naturally, I would definitely would have done away from the root first. But normally if a client is like on the lighter side, I would say like a level 6 or a level 7 and above naturally, then sometimes you can get away with just hitting from root to end there on the application and not hitting away from their scalp. But her hair was being a little bit stubborn, which is totally normal, and that's why you can see now as I'm hitting the front, I'm hitting about an inch away from the root where I could see from the back she has that heat zone, and just hitting those mids, and then later I'll go back in and really hit everything all together. And what this is going to do is it's going to speed up the process in the areas where I'm painting the bleach on. It's going to help process that a little bit quicker because this is where the heat from her scalp is not really hitting and helping the lightener process quicker. So I want to give it an advantage before I apply to the root. So I'm hitting it right now. And again, I'm using the cream bleach just with 20 volume. I don't use anything else other than that, and I normally wouldn't. I normally would not use a 10 or even a 30 on anyone's hair, regardless of what natural level they are. So because I am hitting this mid band here first, I will be going in and hitting the root. And again, the reason why I didn't do this first is because this is just a little bit more extra work and a little bit more tedious rather than just going in and hitting root to end. So I was trying to find if we could do it this most simplest way first, and then once I found out that she needed a little bit extra care and detail to the application, that's when I switched it up. But again, I'm going to show you guys how to, if you do end up doing root to end on the regrowth there, how to fix it. All it is that you'll have to re-hit those areas with lightener, but because we're going to be brightening up some of that mid band from her previous retouch anyways, I really didn't mind doing it this way and going back in because I was going to have to go back in anyways to touch those parts up. So that's why I did that first application technique in the back, and then that is why in the front I am switching it up. Now, I don't really get a good view of this, but just like how I left out the hairline in the back of her head, I'm also leaving out her hairline in the front of her face as well too, because Again, those hairs are going to be really fragile, and especially around the hairline in the front, those hairs are especially fragile in my opinion. So you want to be extra careful and honestly have like the lightener sitting on there at the least amount of time throughout the whole head. Another great thing about doing the technique and application this way when you're going back in and hitting the root is I can also see where I need to re-hit in the mid area. So as I'm going in, hitting that root section, I am resaturating in the mid a little bit to kind of make sure that those parts get really saturated and get a really even lift, because oftentimes those areas, because they don't get the heat, adding extra product or having like a heavier saturation in those areas do help it speed up the process. Also, when you're picking through your sections too and going back in, it can be a little bit difficult, but you want to try to avoid brushing any lightener down to the previous lightened mids and ends. So as I'm picking through, I'm trying to like carefully keep the same sections that I did when I was doing her mid, so that I can avoid any lighteners like slipping through to the mids and ends. Okay, so this is what her hair looked like after we rinsed it out and it was ready, and you can see the warmth from the retouch that we did, but you can also see the warmth from her previous retouch that she got done. And so we're just going in, picking out, and I am only applying lightener to the areas that I feel like are warmer, and you can totally see it even in this clip where the warm pieces are. And right now I am using a powder bleach with 20 volume. This powder bleach is a little bit stronger than the cream bleach that I was using, and it's because I don't want this to be sitting on for too long, but I do want something that will lift it nice and well in these areas as the front is still processing. So the main reason why this is considered a correction is this part, is when you're going back in and using extra bowls of lightener and resaturating in areas that need it. And that's because of the regrowth. You want to prevent the banding and try to get it as even as possible. So here I am reapplying to areas even in the front to try and get those areas a little bit lighter, because they are being a little bit more stubborn since the regrowth was so long. And then the other reason is because I am lightening a little bit more in the front as well from her previous retouch. Alrighty, so now I am going in with my special silver concoction, and I am using the rapid toners. I did a mixture of silver, violet, and moonstone from Pulp Riot, and these ones are pretty much my favorite still right now. I don't find anything that is comparable to these because it's just, they tone really well, and I feel like they don't really darken the hair or make the hair fade out weird like some toners can. I like a silver toner or a gray toner that will fade out blonde. I don't generally like to use anything that is silver when it fades out a little bit tannish or beigeish. I just find that it makes it a lot harder for me to retone them because I'll have to remove that toner, and it's just a lot easier when the fade of it is back to its yellow. And so I'm going in, and you can see I section out the hairline, and I'm applying this toner to her root first, and then just kind of letting it sit because I want it to get a little bit darker on her root area. And so now I'm going in and just applying to the mid where a little bit she has that warmth there, and I am trying to avoid her ends. So her ends faded out a little bit on the greener side because as we washed out that lightener, that previous color that she had on her mids and ends, it lightened up and it kind of got a little bit green from the lightener washing over it. And so right now my primary focus is to tone out all of this yellow. So I want to tone everything out and get all the yellow out and just kind of smush everything and like just reapply wherever is needed and just let that sit. And after I start to see that a lot of the yellow is disappearing is when I will kind of drag that a little bit more down towards the ends to help tone out that green. And so my toner formulation does have that violet in there, and so the violet in my toner is going to help cancel out some of that green on the ends. and you can see I started applying to her hairline, and I know it's ready to apply to the hairline when I start to see that there's almost no more yellow in the back of the hairline, and that's a good indication because that means the back is almost done. And you can see that front hairline, it tones so fast compared to the back. And essentially, since this is the front hairline, you do want this area to be a little bit lighter anyways, so having the toner sit on those areas a little bit less will create that effect where it's a little bit lighter, and in the area where the toner has been sitting on the longest, for example, like the root where I first applied, will have the darkest part of the toner. And this toner concoction that I have made, if I leave it on the hair for like 20 minutes or so, it will turn into like a medium gray with violet undertones, and that's exactly what I personally love to tone my clients with because I find that it fades out the best. I always like to use a more violet based gray or silver opposed to a more blue based one, because I find that blue based ones can fade out quite green, and a lot of my clients don't love the color green against their skin tone, so I always choose to do something that is more on the violet side because it just looks better on their hair, and it fades out better and kind of fades back to that yellow color that we want when they're ready for their next refresh. Alrighty guys, so here is the finished look. I was very happy with how even it came out, and I was even shocked that the toner was able to get rid of a lot of that green on the ends. It's like barely visible there. It's like the slightest bit like a bluish silver tone, but for the most part everything looked really even, and I was really happy. I felt like now I know how to approach her hair the next time she comes in, and I always write down every time I do a client's hair what we did that day, the technique, if it's different, and what toners we use, so that I know exactly what to do whenever they come in for their next touch-up. Alrighty guys, that is it for this week's episode. Thank you guys so much for watching and tuning in, and as always, I will talk to you guys next week.